that now.
Great. Thanks, Dale. And Ken, can we turn to you?
Sure. Hi, I'm Ken Asai. I'm an analyst with the Community College System of New Hampshire, located in, well, the community college offices are in Concord, New Hampshire. I'm actually in Merriman, but so I really haven't paid much attention to AI this week, so I don't really have anything to that caught my attention.
Okay, great, fair enough. And then Dave Jarbo, if we could go out to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dave Jarbo with the Harrison School District in Colorado Springs. I'm the Director for Instructional Technology and STEAM. I did catch an interesting article, maybe nothing new to those that are familiar with AI, but it was about a Korean company who is using artificial intelligence to create lifelike avatars. On their website, they have basically a full-time newscaster that I'm pretty sure it's located in Korea, but they were also, you can buy tutoring avatars powered by AI that look very natural and use natural language and can interact with students. And it seems to be a booming market there for them.
Okay, great. No, very interesting. Thank you. And let's see if we could go down to Jeff Merriman then.
Hey, Jeff Merriman. I'm the CTO of and co-founder of DXtera Institute. I'm located in New England area, up in New Hampshire. And I have to say, this week I have not followed any AI news. I'm trying to bring up some of the. A week ago, I found some really awesome YouTube videos from Computer File that were covering some really cool deep AI issues. If I find some of those, I'll post them. I thought they were interesting and potentially related to the things we're interested in here.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. And next up, Michael Gammel.
Good morning. My name is Michael Gammel, and I'm with Riiid Labs. I primarily wear a business development hat, but have been in education for a long time, and really enjoy the ed tech side of things. Although I'm not a very technical person. What caught my attention this week in AI is I was part of a discussion just yesterday, as a matter of fact, with some folks around the use of AI for evaluating essays. And it was really fascinating because, of course, where the technology is that we could even be having this conversation. But more importantly, what drew me to it was how even the most technical people were approaching this from the standpoint of how do we give teachers back more time by helping them with some of these, shall we say, chores, and really get into the meat of what an instructor might want to do in helping a student with a particular essay or some. Just for context, these essays were related to English language learning. So anyway, it was just a fascinating conversation. Obviously, there's a ways to go there, but it's just wonderful to hear how things are evolving. And with that, I'll pass back to you, Jim.
Okay, great. Thanks, Michael. And next up then is Michelle Barrett.
Hey everyone, I'm Michelle Barrett. I'm the Vice President for Research and Learning Engineering at Edmentum. Edmentum is a company here in the United States that serves K-12 educators in supporting their students with differentiated instruction, online curriculum, so on and so forth. So let's see, I am physically located in Denver, Colorado. Edmentum has offices in Seattle, Texas, and Minnesota. And this week, what caught my eye was an article out of Harvard Business Review, which was on managing AI decision-making tools. So for those of you who have heard me talk in other settings, we think a lot at Edmentum about our educators in the loop. and where and when you insert human decision making, and when and where you allow your AIs to provide those decisions. And this article I found interesting because they're starting to distinguish between human in the loop, human in the loop for exceptions, human on the loop, human out of the loop. And I thought it was a kind of an interesting taxonomy. I can put the link to the article in the chat for folks if you're interested in that as well.
Okay, well, that would be great, Michelle. Okay, excellent. Been looking forward to something to read later on today. And then, so if we can pivot over to Rich Silva.
Good morning. I'm Rich Silva. I do analytics and innovative technology for Bay Path University in Massachusetts in the United States. Although I was thinking, Jim, when you made your comment, we're IT people, so we really don't have a real life. But nevertheless, I live in Southern Connecticut. Bay Path is in Massachusetts. My responsibilities from an AI standpoint are our predictive analytics initiative and our adaptive learning system. And what caught my eye recently was a couple of things going on at MIT where they're actually using AI in an effort to teach robots how to identify when they're being sabotaged, which seems potentially like military or whatever, but I'm sure it has applications to being able to identify robots being able to self-diagnose when they're failing and potentially enter their own tickets. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I hadn't really thought about it from that dimension. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot more coming from that.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Rich. And next, if we could go to Steve Ritter.
Hey, Steve Ritter, founder and chief scientist at Carnegie Learning. We're a curriculum and software provider out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Let's see, I had a research group focused on advanced technologies and improving outcomes for students. And I guess the interesting thing for me is National Science Foundation has put out a solicitation for AI center grants. These are kind of large $16 to $20 million, 4 to 5 year efforts to really improve the state of state of the art in AI. And 2 of the center grants are focused on education, one on STEM learning and the other one on AI and support for students with disabilities. So there was a webinar yesterday that described the program, answered some questions about it. We've just been thinking about what our role is in partnerships and things like that. So really interesting stuff there.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Steve. And let's see if we could go next to Veer Paul. Veer, if you were still on the line. Okay, looks like you may have dropped off. With a little bit of preface then. So Saurav, we are just in the process of having people introduce themselves very briefly, probably about 1 minute or so, with their name, role, organization. The prompt questions are on the screen in front of you, if you can see that. And I would just like to invite you to introduce yourself. Okay, so Saurav, you're on mute. I'll give you maybe another few seconds if you are able to hear me. Okay, well, we will move on then. So just to keep things rolling, I'm wondering, Lauren Lopez, would you like to say a few words to introduce yourself before we move on in the agenda?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lauren Lopez. I'm Director of Operations at DXtera. I'm located in Chicago, Illinois. I haven't read anything this week, but I'm enjoying hearing about what all of you all have read.
Terrific. Thanks, Lauren. Okay, then Dale, if you could advance the slide, I think we will go on from here.
And I'll also introduce myself and answer the questions if you don't mind, Jim, just this one time. So Dale Allen with DXtera. I already mentioned that I'm located in Massachusetts, outside of Boston, And the interesting thing for me is I've been reading a book that Jim recommended from one of his colleagues from long ago or in the past called System Era by Rob Reich and his colleagues at Stanford about really, how do we reset the tech sector and have benchmarks and standards and more thinking beyond just revenue generation and efficiency at the simplest note. So I've been reading that and applying it, I guess, as I think about the things that I'm seeing and hearing throughout the week. And Steve Ritter, just as an FYI, have had conversations with a few other colleagues who are also in the same boat as you, thinking about looking at and wondering who to partner with and collaborate on that. So I'll send you an email just with the folks I've talked to that have said they're looking to partner, just with a couple names.
Okay, excellent. And for those who don't know Dale yet, you will get to know Dale through this process, and it is an experience to look forward to. And maybe I'll follow your role modeling, Dale. So I'm Jim Larimore. I'm the Chief Officer for Equity and Learning at Riiid Labs, and with Dale, one of the people who decided to try to play a catalytic role in bringing this network together. I'm based in lovely Iowa City, Iowa, so right in the middle of the country. And my reading this week, I've just started to get into a book that I would say is AI adjacent. It's a book called American Made by New York Times reporter turned author Farah Stockman. And she has done an intensive kind of bit of research talking with workers who have been displaced, and some of them displaced by the introduction of AI into the workforce. And I just wanted to try to get an understanding of like human implications for technology advances, and to then think a little more deeply about things that we take into account as we plan to introduce or expand the use of technologies. So with that, what we'd like to do now is pivot into introductions of a couple people who have stepped into important roles with the Alliance as we think about how we structure and staff and support the work of the Alliance moving forward. And so it is a great pleasure this morning or today for me to introduce you to Beth Havinga and to invite Beth to share a little bit of information about herself with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to be with everyone. Great to see so many faces. I'm based in Berlin, Germany, so slightly different side of the world from where you all are at the moment. And I think one thing that I read about, which I'm interested in the past week, is that Singapore has just launched a new funding package purely focused on AI in education. To get adoption of AI in education, they're putting 130 million into that. So that was my interesting thing. I have spent the last almost 20 years trying to optimize education systems and services. I've done everything from teaching at a middle school to managing publishing houses and software houses for education industries within Europe. I founded 2 startups as well, one in San Francisco, one in Germany. And I've been consulting with various large corporations, so tech corporations, education publishers, and startups over the past 8 years, sort of pivoting more into consulting with governments in the past 3 years on their digital strategies and how they want to address some of the future topics that are coming ahead. Most recently, I've been the managing director of the German Alliance for Education, which is an NGO that brought together the public and the private sectors within education to develop framework architectures that can then be implemented straight back into the education systems. So we worked on interoperability, ID management, privacy issues, data protection issues, and things like that. And I've had extensive experience in the past years working on standardization of interoperability, so especially designing specific frameworks. I was working with the German government on their changes to the constitution around this, as well as working with the UK Parliament and the Austrian government and things as well, trying to come up with really good models and frameworks so that all of the systems could work well together and speak together, and also very strongly focused on the data protection side of those things as well. And yeah, that's me. And I'm really excited to be part of this as well, moving forward and focusing more on the AI side of things.
Okay, terrific. Well, thanks, Beth, and welcome. As an insider in the formation of the Alliance, I'll let you know that in the few weeks, maybe 2 weeks or so, that Beth has been formally involved with the Alliance. She has, I think, probably read every single thing that's available about kind of what our intentions are and the work that has preceded her. And she has been enormously productive in giving a lot of thought to where we go from here. And you'll hear a bit more from Beth in just a few minutes. So I'll give you that bit of a preview. So next, I want to introduce you to Russ Schilling. I think this will highlight another one of the benefits of being involved in the Alliance or in this network of people. Russ and I have gone in the space of probably less than 2 months from strangers to acquaintances to friends and colleagues and collaborators. And he is a person who's got a multi-dimensional, very interesting kind of work history and set of insights that he brings into the work. And so Russ, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Yes, thanks, Jim. Very happy to be part of this. This is, I think, a very exciting initiative. So I'm right now in my middle of my second week at Riiid Labs. I have a background that's, as Jim said, is kind of wide ranging. So I'm an experimental psychologist with a background in the development of hearing. But over the last 25 years, I spent, or closer to 30, spent 22 years in the military as an experimental psychologist, a scientist, college professor, and program officer. I managed training and education and psychological health programs out of both Office of Naval Research and the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, over that time. Did a lot of game development, VR chatbots, and AI types of systems. I retired in 2014 and joined the Obama administration as the executive director for STEM in the Department of Ed. Worked heavily with the White House through their education initiatives at that time. Finished up in the Obama administration at the end of the administration. Basically joined Digital Promise to work with the Gates Foundation, New Schools, and Chan Zuckerberg on creating a new advanced education research and development fund, which is currently up and running to look at math skills assessment and some other issues. Got that started and running, and then became the chief scientific officer for the American Psychological Association. Spent a few years there, and then basically met Jim and Dale, and here I am today. So in the middle of all that, I was also a program officer in the military for the Sesame Street military child programs. And really started doing deep dives in early childhood screen time, technology, and development. So,
okay.
And here I am.
Thanks, Chris. Well, and we'll see whether the audience for this work tends to be any more or less advanced than the audience that you had with the Sesame Street work as we go forward. So thank you very much for joining us, and great to have you on board. Okay, I think the next item up for us is just a kind of an update. This is a bit of a review and an update on activities and progress. First, just to level set for people about the areas that we're going to start off focusing on around safety, accountability, fairness, and efficacy in the use of AI for education. And you'll hear more about this, I think, coming up in some of Beth's remarks. We're working very intentionally across a broad ecosystem of stakeholders in the use of AI in education, and doing this work from the very beginning globally. And so we've had some interesting conversations with people in different parts of the world. I was on a Riiid call last night with a group of university researchers in Singapore who now have an interest in joining with us as well. And they're looking forward to opportunities to collaborate with other researchers in the field to leverage some of their capabilities. But we will constantly, I think, refer out to the ecosystem model as we approach this work. We continue to grow. I think we're currently at about 115 or 115 plus engaged participants across 15 plus countries, continuing to grow very organically. So we've not yet pushed out beyond into that next layer of outreach around membership, but that will be coming in the coming weeks and months. And as you've heard this morning, we've been we're in the early stages of adding some very high quality experienced staff capacity to the group, so that as we get to work together, we'll be able to accelerate and expand our progress pretty quickly. And as Dale mentioned last month when we met, we've had conversations with some significant philanthropic organizations, including the Gates Foundation and Schmidt Futures Foundation, which have expressed an interest in helping to support directly or indirectly the work that the Alliance is doing. And we've had an interesting conversation that we're following up with a venture capital group that's interested in education technology that is values-wise very mission aligned with where we are. So we'll keep you all posted on those specific opportunities as they come along. And I think as Steve and Dale mentioned this morning, there are other opportunities that are coming along through the Institute for Educational Sciences, or NSF, where participants in the Alliance might actually want to partner together on some of those activities. This is probably just the last of the reminder slides that we are kind of organizing around levels of membership, which are really is, I think on one level, paying attention to our need to become self-sustaining and autonomous or independent as an organization through the revenues that we generate. So we have a set of membership levels, but we very purposefully put together the mission supporter level of this, recognizing that there are some organizations, including nonprofits, that may not be able to contribute as much financially, but that have a lot of wealth and insight and experience and talent to bring to the discussion. So we have a bit of a sliding scale in terms of financial contribution there. And we will leverage outside sponsors. And I think as we move forward, Beth has some ideas that we will explore together about different sources of revenues that can be used to help support our activities that may make things a bit more robust or may help us move more quickly. We have wanted to keep the money on one side of the screen and participation and governance separate from that. So we are not going to create a pay-to-play type environment. We do want membership, or we do want representation across all different levels of membership in the working groups, in the leadership council, which will play a critical role in decision making, and in a probably at the beginning a 9-person or so steering committee, which will make some of the administrative decisions or strategic directional decisions as we move forward. But we are open to people's interests and their ability to commit time to the various types of governance roles that we'll need to fill out over time. And on the far right side of the screen, you'll see that it's just a reminder to us to think about the different types of stakeholders that we want to keep engaged or keep informed about the work that we're pursuing. So thanks, Dale. Okay, and so with that, and before we get to discussions or kind of Q&A, we really wanted to serve up some new information to you. And I will say this is the work product that Beth has been able to generate very quickly based on her experience and a deep dive and all of the information that we've been able to make available to her. But she started to do a gap analysis and to identify emerging needs and priorities for the Alliance. And so we want to give you a preview of that information this morning and then have some time for discussion. So Beth, can I turn things back over to you?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been so exciting for me to come in and look at everything that's already been done, and then also see some of the things that we could potentially be doing in the future. And for me, it's also been important to start dividing some of the ideas that we've had and some of the work that we want to do into some other categories. And so one of the big things that we've been looking at is understanding that whilst our goal might be to create more standardized and certified environments within this education ecosystem for AI that we're working in, there's some other steps that need to happen or are necessary surrounding that at the same time as that. And so we've been also very strongly focused on the education side of things in terms of actually educating others and organizations, and also in that thought leadership component. We think it's extremely important to ensure that everyone's understanding what we're actually talking about and what's going on. So in so saying, I was looking at what already exists globally, and where we can fit in and provide a real benefit, not only to our members, but then also back into the wider education community. And I was looking at sort of 4 different areas. One of them was the thought leadership thing. And so at the moment, there's a lot of different government task forces and bodies. There's a lot of NGOs or initiatives that build think tanks. There are initiatives focused on ethics and AI everywhere at the moment. I think there's so many different committees that you can belong to on that topic. There's also a lot of research, especially academic research, that's going into the ethics component of AI. In terms of standardization, there's a lot of interoperability standards, or not even a lot, there's some interoperability standards. There's about 3 major bodies that all of us are aware of that work on specific actions, on specific interactions. There are pros and cons for each of those. There's also some standards around data privacy, depending on which geographic region we're in. There's also obviously education standards, also dependent on where we are based in terms of what the pedagogy is, what kind of administration activities are surrounding that. There's different standards bodies at a national or supranational level that require public bodies to act in certain ways. And there's also regulatory bodies that exist. In terms of AI, there are also standards organizations that are looking into this, but not specifically in terms of education at this stage. Doing sort of a deeper dive over in Europe in the last couple of weeks, it's come to my attention that whilst there are these national bodies and these standards organizations that are government funded, none of them actually have education working groups. So that's going to be interesting pushing that forward. And there's also groups that are working on ethics standards for AI and cybersecurity bodies that are working on that as well. So there's a really, really strong focus on the ethics component, which I believe speaks to something that we have been noticing and really want to work with. And that's this idea around the fear that's associated with AI. So there's a fear-based component in a lot of the decisions that are being made. There's a fear-based component in a lot of the reactions that the regulatory bodies are taking. And I think that then for us is mirrored in the is mirrored in the work that we want to do with the education and the thought leadership to really get a better understanding of what we're dealing with. What are some of those risks? But also, what are some of the positives and what is some of the innovation that we can see, provided that we have the right frameworks? And then on the last point we have is the certification. So there already are a bunch of different certification bodies that exist, either government funded, ministry funded, there's public, there's private certification bodies, all with pros and cons. There's hardware and software seals of approval, et cetera. So also some of those are government related, depending which country you're in. And coming from certain data protection agencies, there's whitelists and blacklists for products, et cetera. So then where do we fit in? In terms of thought leadership, I think it's really clear that there needs to be a very strong voice educating not only the user side and also some of the parents of the user side, but then on the other hand, the ministries, the governments, the public bodies that are making those regulations and decisions, policy decisions that are going to really strongly affect what's being developed and what can develop in the next decades to come. There's also a real need for us to understand those key terms that are being talked about and really make them accessible to everybody. And there's a need to have those policy bodies and decision-making bodies supported by people who know what they're talking about, but people who don't necessarily have a financial gain as their reason for doing that. In terms of the standards, there's a real need to develop a common vocabulary and common definitions so that we know that we're talking about the same thing globally. There's a need for clear modeling, and keeping in mind that a lot of people will have proprietary things they're working on. It is possible to work with abstract modeling that at least provides us with an idea of what's happening. So what kind of model do they fit into? Where does the data flow? What kind of things are we talking about? So that not only the users have a better understanding of what's going on and they can make the decisions, but also then the regulatory bodies like the data protection agencies who oftentimes are the ones who are approving products for use, have the ability to really get behind what's happening and compare things properly. There's also a real need to gather those use cases and do a comprehensive stakeholder mapping, and then truly define some of the standards along the SAFE categories that we've been discussing. In terms of standards for AI, I think one of the strongest things that we are already doing and will continue to do is bringing together all the existing work to create the best synergies we possibly can between what's out there. So all of that work and research that's going into AI, not only in the area of ethics, but bringing everyone together so that we can create a global understanding and really disseminate the knowledge that's already there, build on gaps that might be there, and call on all of those strengths. That also helps us then determine those gaps for the specific education use cases that we're going to want to build on with the standards that we're hoping to develop. And first and foremost, I think as well, working along those lines of the safe categories. I think that's a really important thing that isn't really being focused on. There's other topics that have been on the edge, like the privacy is definitely a really big topic, but there's been such a strong focus on the ethics that a lot of the others have kind of gone by the wayside, which builds into that fear component as well, because there isn't enough really good, valuable information that's out there around those other topics. And in terms of certification, we've been discussing more as well how we can build a framework for certifying AI that can then be implemented through all of the regulatory bodies and other certification bodies globally, so that it is being used, so that everything can be comparable, so that there is also an ease of access to other markets for those who are working with products, or if you're using the products, access to things from other markets, so that you have a really clear understanding of what is safe, what will work. And then really supporting the communication between all of those certification bodies and supporting those certification processes. So putting all of that together, I came up with about 8 different points that I think really defines the work that we will be doing over the next while. And that's building this network. And that's a network of trust, not only for our members, so they understand those who are with us are very strongly behind the principles and the ideas that we're working towards, but also externally, so that those who are wanting to, are on that user side that Jim was pointing out before, can understand that those who belong to this organization really do stand for those principles and are working really, really hard to make this accessible. Another big step is developing those common definitions and frameworks, developing those models, leading neutral education initiatives that will help build that understanding and education, providing thought leadership within all levels of the education industry to bring this topic forward, and facilitate events and workshops, papers, bringing together some of the minds that we're working with across the globe to help create really targeted communication around this. And then helping to standardize the AI ecosystem within education, encompassing the categories that I think are so important and that have been identified by the team that have been leading this and founding this. And then determining those certification frameworks I was discussing. So those things that can mean we can be supporting at a global level the certification of safe AI for education, and then increasing the visibility of this topic in an unbiased way. So the next slide then also gives you sort of overview of how our steps will be moving. And our goal, as I said before, is to have clearly defined global standards and frameworks that are aligned with the SAFE principles that will protect users and further the education innovation ecosystem. I think that's a really important point, that the standards and the frameworks that we're defining are really going to be about also protecting that innovation to keep moving and to be coming up with new amazing things that we can be doing whilst being entirely safe and protecting our users and our developing institutions. Some of our first steps will be defining those vocabularies and some of the initial frameworks and the modeling, doing some of the stakeholder education, some of the initiatives we've been talking about with regard to education and thought leadership, as well as increasing visibility and awareness around the safe categories. Some of the second steps then moving further down will be more comprehensive stakeholder and use case mapping, requirements mapping, moving into sort of the standards and certification framework ideas, and also the evaluation and definition of those at a more in-depth level, and creating the targeted working groups then that we've been discussing with you, and some of the implementation of visibility initiatives. And I think it's important, as Jim and Dale have both mentioned, this is a community activity, and I think it's so important that we have representatives from every level. However, we can come together in whichever level of membership or mission supporter that means, because it is important that we have the voices from every single level to make sure that what we're doing does find resonance and can be implemented. So that's where I got to in the first couple of weeks. And as they keep mentioning, I've created a massive document that they keep joking about. And my goal is to get to that 700 pages that you just said before. It's not quite there, but I'm getting close. So
yeah. Well, let us know when you get to 800 though.
Yeah, thanks.
So we'll set aside a virtual reading room where you take yourself to dig through this document. Thank you, Beth, so much for walking us through this information.
If I could just interrupt just briefly, just before we move to discussion with your leadership, Beth, and Russ, on behalf of the community and others, again, you see a little snippet here of some expertise, talent, and passion being brought to life, but we're just thrilled that both Beth and Russ have joined the team. We're fortunate at DXtera to have worked with Beth from afar over the last few years, and we're so glad that we were able to convince her that this was a good idea. It didn't take much. She loved it from the start and has brought her passion right away. And this is a little snippet. You'll see more in December with the roadmap, and many of you offline will be involved in these discussions. So thank you, and I'll turn it back to you, Jim.
Excellent. Thanks, Dale. So one of the real benefits of the Alliance is that we get to bring such an interesting, experienced and diverse collection of people together. So we want to pivot now into kind of discussion. And what I would suggest is that maybe we could start with questions that you might have about information that Beth presented, or insights or advice that you think would be important to offer at this point, reactions to the ideas in general. And then we can see where we go from there. But let me open this up to just ask what questions or what insights you might have that you think would be important to share at this point.
Yeah, I'd just like to say this really, Beth's slides really helped me to kind of get focused on this right now. So this was very nice.
Okay, great. Thanks, Russ. Yeah, and I think, and maybe since I used to spend a little time in the classroom, I will warn people that I won't hesitate to cold call. And in particular, because of conversations that we've had over the last year, would love to hear kind of initial reactions from Michelle Barrett and Steve Ritter as people who have been in the field, kind of working on technology-based learning platforms for a while. Do you feel like we're largely moving in the right direction or kind of facing in the right direction as we get started with this?
I'll chime in. So yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things that we always worry about is how much to emphasize the AI in our product versus how much to not talk about it, right? And that's true with other aspects like machine learning and things like that people may or may not recognize as AI. So I'm particularly interested in maybe it's certification, but it's certainly communication. Like as one example of this, I keep telling the Educational Data Mining Society to change their name, right? Data mining has this connotation of creating kind of secret knowledge that supports marketing in particular. And, we have a lot of agreements that we get with school districts where they say you're forbidden to use data mining. And it's usually phrased like for the purposes of marketing to students and stuff like that. But I think, that's just something that we worry about. And so like, again, like you could think that one goal would be to try and rebrand data mining as being something that's kind of more acceptable and potentially helpful. I'm not hugely optimistic that we'll be able to do that. So in some ways, like it's navigating that space that I think is really important.
Great, thanks, Steve. That's a helpful insight, and I think Beth has highlighted in some of our offline conversations how important the communication side of this is going to be, and especially because we are communicating with people who spend all day, every day thinking about technology and education, and we have other people who think very broadly about education and technology as simply a set of tools that might be used. So yeah, I think we will circle back around to this.
Yeah, I think if I can chime in as well, a huge issue that we're all going to be facing and why the communication part is so key is that a lot of the people who are making the decisions aren't well versed in this topic at all. They don't have the time to be. They're covering a lot of other topics. I think, especially dealing with different regional ministries in the past little while, we've got the same people here buying textbooks who are buying the tractors the next day for their other industries. And I think that's a really key point. If we can hand them the information that makes them feel empowered to make better decisions, then we've already done something huge.
Okay, terrific. Thank you both. And Michelle, you would like to add in?
Sure. Yeah. So just an observation as we think about, I think that Beth, that you were bringing up kind of some common vocabulary definitions, some abstract modeling and such. One of the things that I have noticed is that we tend to go from like this very high level to very teeny tiny specific use cases very, very quickly when we talk about applications of AI in education. And so, for example, Michael, you were bringing up the essay scoring. That comes up many, many times, I feel like, in terms of like, well, here's this one use case, and it gets very small. And so one of the things that I think might be really helpful for this organization to think about is how do we help fill the middle there with maybe purpose of certain, overall, is it an accessibility thing? Is it an availability thing? Is it an affordability? Like, how do we actually bring it up into the in-between between, these really broad statements, and then think about outcomes that we're really trying to achieve, and then get into the use cases. So that's one of the observations that I have, and I think an opportunity for an organization like this to really start putting some framing around, so that because any individual, each of us as individual organizations probably have some of those very specific discrete use cases, but they all kind of probably do fit into some broader paradigm that would be really helpful for kind of cataloging and classifying what we're talking about. And that will help with the certification as well, because with certification, it's always like, for what purpose and for whom, and why would somebody care about you having a certification on a particular product or platform or idea. So those are just a couple of the observations that I'd have just out of the gate.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Thanks very much for that. And so Dave Jarbo, your name has been popping up in my head as Steve and Michelle have offered their comments, because you are in the schools, in the trenches, and spend a lot of your day working with teachers and other education decision makers. Any reaction to what you're hearing so far, or advice about how we try to ensure that your colleagues and people who are doing the kind of work that you do have a prominent voice in these discussions?
Yeah, I really appreciate that focus, because a lot of times in education, when policies come down, it's kind of what's being done to us rather than asking us in the first place, so that it can actually be meaningful and not just be kind of perfunctory or something that comes out of the legislative body. I'm thinking of a lot of the data privacy initiatives and sign-on from corporate and different types of pledges. Really didn't amount to anything until different legislative bodies, generally state by state, because there is nothing national yet on data privacy specifically around agreements. So, I mean, every district, at least in Colorado, had to negotiate those data privacy agreements company by company. And many hours were spent on that and funds. So that's, yeah, if we can keep that in mind, that where the rubber meets the road and the implications there, with not being over, because I hear about the do no harm, so not wanting to hamper the advancements and the benefits, but to still proceed cautiously and purposely. And the one other thing, going kind of like that on a more international level, I'm signed up for the UNESCO AI, let me read, International Forum International Forum on Artificial Intelligence and Education 2021 is next week by UNESCO.
Are you attending that in person in China, or did you get?
No, I'm not. No,
No.
I'll be attending. I'll be attending virtually. Although I probably won't get up at 1:30. I'll probably watch the recording for the sessions I signed up for. But what I found interesting is it says, at the bottom, the partners. UNESCO partners with the Ministry of Education of People's Republic of China and the National Commission of the People's Republic of China for UNESCO. And that's it. Those are the only two partners listed on this international forum. It was just an observation. I found that curious that it wasn't broader, didn't have broader partnership participation.
If I could, on that note, David, I was joking a little bit about attending in China because of all sorts of feasibility reasons. That's really not working for people to get to China right now.
Right.
But your point about the UNESCO collaboration. So that specific track they've been working on has been with the Chinese government in particular. They've done it for a couple of years, and they're starting to bring to light some information from that space, from that perspective, from that region. We've been in discussions a level up at UNESCO, and again have come into an agreement about a multinational series kind of events that incorporate the topics we're talking about the use of data for learning, maybe be a little broader than just one region's perspective, but could be much more the multinational global perspective that Beth just laid out, that we've all been talking about. That isn't so much, as Beth put in the chat, starting with technology, but rather starting with the users, the policymakers, the leaders, the companies, the ecosystem, and getting into technology, as Michelle noted, when appropriate. So there'll be more to come about the UNESCO relationship and collaboration, but that's within their bureaucracy. You can imagine if you extrapolate your own school district up to a multinational, what the bureaucracy is like.
Oh, absolutely.
They have different things that go on for good reasons for that region, but maybe aren't the entire UNESCO body. So there'll be more to come with us directly with UNESCO and with the Broadband Commission and Global Education Coalition. So for time's sake, I'll stop there, Jim.
Okay, sure. Yeah, and I am glad that you brought that up, Joe, because I think for the event series that we can organize with UNESCO, and even here in the US coming up in April for the ASU GSB EdTech Conference, there is a real opportunity to try to kind of highlight or contextualize teacher voice or educator voice in the discussions. And I think we can think about what the last few minutes of conversation have been about in terms of having a communication strategy and really thinking about the voice that we can have for the broader field that I think we will want to lean in on. With that, and knowing that we have, I think, about 6 minutes left, I want to ask, so we've heard from Dave, who brings a really well-grounded K-12 perspective on this. We also have Ken and Rich, who are working in the post-secondary sector. And I'm wondering if either or both of you have any thoughts that you'd like to share at this stage.
Well, I was thinking, thanks, Jim. I was thinking about, as we go through this, being mindful of being able to raise the bar in terms of quality, safety, standards, best practices, et cetera, in a way that doesn't unintentionally create barriers for entry for organizations. And if possible, also perhaps eliminates some or lowers the threshold for entry for schools. I know I do a lot of, I've done presentations around predictive analytics and such, and often it's not an IT person. I'm dealing with someone in an admissions office that's going, yeah, but I don't have a server or a neural network, or can I do this in Excel? And I think, perhaps one of the best ways we can look to position this is to be able to say, well, not only can we help you with best practices and efficacy, but we can show you the easier, softer way to get in and get started. The other thing that came to mind just from Beth's comments, which I appreciated quite a bit, when she made reference to the fear dynamic, it really made me think about what I refer to as reactionary policy creation.
Yeah.
And I see that in institutions, but also more broadly. And what I see is and the way I define that is you end up with policies or worse, bureaucracies that get created around the idea of we need to make sure that that never happens, or we need to make sure that that never happens again. And I think often when we do not put forth a proactive, this is what we want to see happening, and this is the way we think it should happen, then we're opening up a space for reactionary policy. And in my experience, reactionary policy is almost always poor policy from a structural standpoint. So I think the more that we can put forth this idea of best practices and begin to create a culture where we're discussing what should be happening and how it should be happening, maybe we're going to have an ability to impact the creation of bad reactionary policy in various ways.
Yep. Great points.
I think I have to kind of echo a little bit of what Rich is saying. Being very new at this, understanding this whole area of AI in the education, it would be most helpful if we had, I guess, areas that would help lead us into the AI space, because I think there's just not a lot of knowledge and not a lot of understanding of that whole space. And a lot of the policies and the high level stuff that you're talking about is great, but at where, from our point of view, we really need something that's much kind of a lower guidance, somewhere to help us along in, to get to the space that that probably we should be getting to, but just are not there yet.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Ken. So I think we have just a couple minutes left. Some of us may be able to stay online for a bit after our hard stop at the top of the hour. But Beth, since people have been responding to the 4 slides that you shared with us this morning, any transition or wrap-up comments that you want to make before we hit just a couple tactical reminders?
This is all going to lead to more pages of my presentation, so thank you. It's really great, and I think listening to you all, there's so much that echoes what I'm thinking, and I think it's fantastic to see that what we're planning is aligned with what you need and how we can get there together. And I think it's really important to me as well to answer to those comments that we are definitely working at a level that you can use. So I think there's 2 levels that we need to be educating at. One's definitely supporting the higher level people, but the other one's also supporting in the field. So everyone who's out there doing the daily grind with all of these topics as well, making sure that there's comprehensive packages that help with the information you need with that as well. Yeah. I think there's so much to do, but I agree as well. We need to start at a level that makes sense before we even go into some of the technical components. And then I think looking at your slide, we'd like to see how all of you can help us get there and how you can participate as part of the community. I'll hand back to Jim with that.
Okay, great. It's a great reminder that, I think there's so much wisdom in proverbs from different cultures and different periods of time. And I think, the African proverb that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we're in a situation where we want to go fast and far. So we will have to create our plan very carefully for that. So we're on this journey together, which I think is one of the key takeaways also from Beth's last comment. If you are joining us on this journey, just want to remind you that we do want to circle back on the MOU for membership. If you have questions about that or need a discussion partner to guide you through it, Dale and I are available, and we'll be spending some time. And Michael Gammel has agreed to spend some of his time working with us on those membership agreements as well. There's an interest form because we definitely want to know which topics you are most interested in, both so we can inform you, but then also engage you. And we'd like to get this kind of first burst of activity, gathering this information done around memberships and interest forms by the end of the month of November, so that we will be able to share information or kind of disclose it publicly and have time to prepare some presentation materials for the December 15th meeting, the big kind of launch event for that. So you'll be hearing from us, and we would love to hear from you. Oh, and there you have it. Thanks, Dale. These are the time slots for the December 15th meeting, where we hope to be able to share more roadmap information with you and roll up our sleeves and really get moving. So Dale, any final comments or things that you would like the group to know?
No, I think, you've hit them all. It's been great to have Russ and Beth be introduced today and have input from the collective community. We'll repeat the session again in roughly 10 hours to the other half of the world that joins in. But we are moving to make sure that our first announcements here in December about 2022 and our kind of formalized launch of the Alliance has a strong representative group for the governance and across the membership. And then as we start communications to push growth and engagement and developing in a way that we've just talked about around the world can occur with, again, events starting in February or so with activities with UNESCO and then through with a schedule of events. And the only other two things I'd ask people to offer up anything they have on electronically to us. You see the emails on the screen. As an evolving organization, we are always looking for great talent to be contributed and or join us. Communications, you've heard, is a big area. So we've had a few companies or organizations who said, hey, our VP of communications actually might be able to be engaged in that. Or I know of someone. Please send those along to us and encourage that within your teams. And the second is, if you know of events on the roadmap for 2022 that you think it makes sense to have the Alliance, inclusive of you recommending that organization join a presentation or be involved, please share that as well. We have kind of a comprehensive list growing, but we want to make sure we are touching the spots that you're engaged already and being supportive of your works, but also in growing the network collectively. So with that, I'd say thank you and appreciate everyone's time and energy today.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll look forward to reconnecting next month.